Hi there, everyone. My name's Christian Barker. It's Thursday, 6 p.m. here in sunny, sultry Singapore, and yeah, you're tuned into today's episode of Banter with Barker, where this evening I have the pleasure of speaking with a fantastic, well, I'd like to say local artist from here in Singapore, but he's very much a man of the world. The definition of cosmopolitanism. A fella name of Steve Lawler, who goes by the professional pen name nom de guerre of Mojoko, Mojoko, not to be confused with Steve Lawler, the progressive house DJ out of the UK, not to be confused with Mojoko, the house music group fronted by Rasheen Murphy, and also not to be confused with anyone else. Steve will be joining us very shortly, and he's got a couple of new art exhibitions on at the moment, which have been a little bit disrupted by the whole COVID situation. So we're going to have a chat with him about that, and see how he's getting on in the newly digital world. Steve has also just produced a new publication called the Quaranzine, a kind of fanzine, but based around artworks that have been created by various artists during this quarantine period. Steve has just checked on in. I'm gonna send him an invite now, and hopefully we'll get him looped into the conversation. Good to see you, Steve. How you doing?
Hello. Yeah, good, thanks. How are you?
All right. I'm glad to see you did put on a shirt as
I've
promised.
I've got pants on as well.
Well, me too. They're short pants, but yeah. Look, nevertheless, I was recently looking at my follower statistics, and I think I've only got about sort of 23% female followers. So I think either of us leaving our shirt off for this conversation
Get up the numbers.
Those numbers to absolutely plummet. Anyway, how have you been going over the last few months? As I just did a little bit of an intro of you and some of the stuff that you've been working on, but obviously, you've got a couple of exhibitions that you're either involved in or fully staging at the moment that have been kind of disrupted by the present situation.
Yeah, I mean, actually, when the lockdown happened, I was due to do my solo show, literally the week that we got sent home. So yeah, that was a bit of it was still a bit it was a bit nerve-wracking trying to throw an event when there was more and more cases going on. So everyone was feeling a bit nervous about doing a show anyway. So anyway, it's been fine. I think the show's opening finally this week. And it's given me a bit of time to even make some more works for it and kind of fine tune it in a way that I never normally had. So that time's been really welcome. And then of course during lockdown, I don't even know how long it's been. I mean, what is it, 6 months or 1 month, or I don't know.
I think it's 90 something days. I think we've been hanging out at home, really.
Right. Okay. So yeah. So for me, like during that period, it became really easy to work because there was no distractions. There was no meetings. There was no kind of like commuting. So I found the headspace to not just do my own work, which is kind of self-indulgent, but also do some sort of like group projects. We did a group show that was also supposed to happen, an Akira show. Akira, the anime, a kind of fan art show that was due to happen in April. Also, that got knocked on the head. And tentatively, we'll still do the physical show, but it felt like a good opportunity to try something out. So we did a virtual version, and the response was kind of really cool. And it also, I think, there was more people came to the online show than would have come to the physical show. I think we have, in the first week, there was like 6,000 views of the gallery. It was like a sort of online space that you could move around and look at the artwork. And then, and then
Sorry, Steve, I don't want to interrupt, but for anyone who wants to, who's watching this now or watching back on the recording and wants to take a look at that, where will they find the exhibition online? What's the URL?
It's on the Unusual Network website. So it's theunusualnetwork.com.
Okay. Yep.
And of course you can go there, you can have a sort of mooch around and see the artworks, but then you can also buy them. And actually sales have been really good through that channel. I mean, not as good as a physical show, but I think for what we were expecting, they were better than we expected. And also international sales, which is something that wouldn't have happened at a physical show. So yeah, that was a sort of a happy experiment, and it also created some sort of new ideas for us in terms of how we could develop online exhibitions in the future, perhaps using moving image and really testing the boundaries on that. So we're exploring that now, like how to push that next level. And also,
and it is. I want to say to anyone who's sort of tempted to take a look, it is very much a virtual gallery experience. It's quite an immersive thing. It's not just popping into a website and taking a look at the art that's on offer, though. There's that aspect to it. It is, you guys have endeavored to, give us the true gallery experience without the cheap wine that normally comes with that.
One of the problems now is we've set the expectations of like that's what it's going to look like in real life. So like I don't think we're going to be able to deliver that. It's really like a cyberpunk sort of neo, post-apocalyptic gallery. And I mean, it's not trying to recreate that white cube that we are seeing a lot of these sort of attempts at virtual galleries, just replicating what the physical space looked like. I think we were interested. I think technically we were restricted by a few things, but I think adding those textures, those sounds, those things that you probably couldn't get in real life, and also to be able to make large sculptures that were in the space. They take cold hard cash to do in real life, but you can really let go in a sort of virtual environment. So we did have a bit of fun, but not as much fun as we could have. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg and what we can really kind of achieve in that virtual gallery space.
Very cool.
And gallery is such a weird word. I mean, I think an online experience is really interesting. I think we got the idea from watching the Travis Scott concert on Fortnite. Okay. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it was like you watched it on the PlayStation, and it was all singing and dancing and moving, and you could jump around while you were watching it. And I think, they hit a new level and in terms of online experience. And it was multiplayer, like you could go in, like log in with your friends and stand together and jump around, and you could hit each other as well at the same time. So there was something really exciting about that, and it just sort of unlocked. I mean, I've got to give credit to Race Crail, who's Super Cybertown. Oh, there we go, just logged in. He was the sort of mastermind of making that 3D space, and I think he's also got an artistic vision. I mean, if you look at his personal work, it's gay-line futuristic, and it's sort of hilarious overload of the senses, and I think he was perfect for that Akira exhibition. Not only that, he was one of the artists, but I think bringing him in at that level to create a space meant he could really flex his muscles and show what could be done. And then at a very sort of simple level. But hopefully when people see that, especially the younger crowd, they can look at that and they'll be like, oh my God, and then it unlocks a lot of potential. And I think that, for me, I've seen a couple of things online, and then they do that. And that's really a magical thing when it starts to sort of give you potential. Do you see what I mean? I think it happens less and less, not just the older you get, but the more that formulas are being followed. And it's quite rare for something to do that. And obviously digital is a space where it's largely unexplored. And I mean, I was around when that early internet shit was going off, and there was a lot of experimental work, and that was really exciting. But I kind of tapered off for a long time, and I think it's only really recently people are starting to push it again and blend like a physical space and a physical experience and a digital experience. I mean, VR does it, but everyone I mean, most people hate VR, hate wearing the headset, but actually once you're plugged in, it's really kind of, wow,
It's getting better.
it is
improving.
moving.
No, but it's funny that you say that about in the earlier days of the internet, perhaps people were being a little bit more creative and have fallen back. And I will go back and talk about Eyeyah, your kids magazine, and the Quaranzine that you've just done. But obviously my background is in magazines and websites and digital magazines, whatever you want to call it, digital publishing. The thing that strikes, I read a lot of my magazines on my iPad now, and I've used that to read magazines ever since getting my first iPad. But I found that in the earliest days of iPad magazines, they were a lot more boundary pushing and a lot more avant-garde and a lot more forward thinking than they are now. Now they're basically mostly just a PDF of the magazine that you get that you just scroll through. And that's great. But I remember the earliest ones, loads of animation, there was embedded video, there was a lot of links, and it was just really, pushed it a lot more. Now it is just it's a PDF that you look at.
Yeah, I think because I've got a couple of views on this. I was really excited by those sort of animated covers and things you saw at the early days of digital publishing. Yeah, they still have a bit of that, and sort of videos to go alongside articles. That I think what started to happen was a lot of this sort of cross-platform idea. Like you couldn't look at it on a computer; you could only look at it on an iPad, and this PDF idea became kind of cross-platform and more and more neutralized in terms of its richness. That the more formats it was viewable on meant that kind of sort of more dumbed down it got, and so obviously there's still people exploring and pushing the limits. We've just tried to make an app which is for the Eyeyah. I'll show you. And the idea is exactly that. We do a physical magazine, which is this thing, right?
Yeah.
It's aimed at kids, but actually the idea is it's about creativity and introducing creativity to a broader audience. But obviously all the people that buy it, all the people consume it, are already creators. So I'm showing you now our latest thing, and it's an app that is also a dirty word. I tell people to download the app, whatever. So I'll click start, and it's not like an app you've seen. It's a sort of journey. It's like a storybook that's a bit animated. And this is about food, or rather healthy eating, things like that. Where's the next button? So I'll just show you a couple of pages, but we've got some interactive things in here. This says shake the jelly. So I gotta shake the iPad, and then the things wobble. Is it wobbling?
I don't know. You definitely are.
There we go.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Right, and then sort of stupid stuff like that.
Very cool.
And of course, this is exactly that. It's little challenges, little interstitials with messaging. Desserts is stressed, spelt backwards. This is interesting. This is a caption contest. So you're kind of encouraged to nurture your creative muscles, people say, can you teach creativity? And can you measure creativity? And this is an area that we're really interested in. And of course, it is a sort of murky area, because creativity is often associated with creating music or dance or painting or fine art and performance. And actually, that's kind of expression. Creativity's what I see it as is a way of thinking. It's a way of solving problems. You've got coders who are creative, graphic designers who are creative. And there's a lot of other factors at play, being observant, being critical. They're all parts of, it's not a left brain, right brain thing. It's about it's about applying a thinking method to existing things and seeing if you can improve on them. And that's creativity, right? That's the way I see it. It's a muscle, and you can nurture that. So how do you measure it? So this idea was, I was looking when in the old days of advertising school. So I come from an advertising background. They used to have creativity tests, and some of them were kind of anecdotes, and you had to come up with a how do they solve this argument type thing, and it would be a cartoon, and it would you have to come up with a solution to their problem. And one of them that really stuck in my mind was this caption contest, because if you look at the New Yorker, or you look at some really good publications in history, caption contests is a level playing field. Like if you're able to tell a joke, right, that means you're creative. Okay, I don't care if you can't draw. If you've got that ability to short circuit your brain and make somebody laugh, that's creativity. And so caption contest is a good example of being creative. So I might ask you to come up with a caption for that, right? And this applies to adults and children and whoever, right? So you see the shark in the fizzy drink, and then you'd write fizzy shark, or you'd write shark in a drink, and you can measure how creative those answers were by common sense, oh, that guy's really made a leap with his answer. And so you can then start to merit and reward creativity and people who think in that way, and by encouraging it, giving them more opportunities like this, win contests, and then it's a really tangible thing. So that's what's been driving us in terms of community type projects, right? So with things like Cult and with things like The Unusual Network, we have an audience, right? And the audience is quick. They're already creative. We don't have to sell them anything. It's they're part of a cultural sort of idea. What Eyeyah's trying to do is really go ground level, all schools, all families, and demystify creativity and art, and get them appreciating that this sort of visual communication, it can be effective. We talk about hot topics, we talk about internet, we talk about food, the oceans, trash, things like that. But
I'm curious though, Steve. With and I'll explain for anyone who's not here in Singapore that Eyeyah, though you guys spell it EYE as in I-A-H, Eyeyah. But Eyeyah is the Singaporean word, which is it's a little bit forget about it. It's got a lot of meanings. It's you can use it in many different ways. It's an exclamation.
It's an exclamation, but it's not. If you're in South America, this is Eyeyah. Okay. So it's a pretty universal thing to say Eyeyah. I mean, it is definitely colloquial Cantonese, Singlish, or Singaporean Chinese. But Eyeyah means Papa in Malay. It's got various tenets, but I think the whole purpose was to do because it's a visual publication. Everything is it's illustrated facts. It's things that kind of hopefully lower the barrier between someone that doesn't want to be told what to do, and so for instance, this is taking the old Mad magazine, right? So this is about a like farm, right? And then it's also got the Mad fold-in. So if you do the old thingy, you see the monkey on the iPad, and then you look behind, and then there's all these fake likes. And just using humor, visual puns, this sort of thing about internet addiction, and working with graphic designers, illustrators, skilled image makers, people from publication design, and applying that stuff into education. And I think it's definitely been keeping us interested. I think there's two things mainly that go on with me. One is my own artwork, and I do that because I can't I don't know, it's a way of filtering all the kind of shit in my head. But Eyeyah's really eloquent. It's it's really crafted. It's really singular in its messaging, and it's a lot more make universal in terms of its appeal. My stuff is very like trashy and like punk and maybe a bit explicit or X-rated or violent or whatever. But I think whenever I do my own work for an extended period of time, I start feeling a little selfish about it, and that I'm like, hey, what good is this doing anybody? Which is why I've always done those other group shows and those other kind of partnerships, or I suppose like exhibitions that I don't get any money for. And you know, the only purpose it serves is to just create a buzz and make and give like artwork to people who've never seen it. I give artists an opportunity to make some work for a show, which isn't like high pressure, like solo show where you've got to make 20 works. It's like everyone can do one piece. Even outsiders, like, you know, jewelry designers or like sneaker customizers.
Yeah.
We've done some funny old shows in the past. We did Blade Runner. We've done The Shining. We did Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was great. We had 42 artists. One was a cake artist. One soda baby grow with two heads. So really mixed media stuff. And it's all super like lo-fi, like it's done in somebody's backyard of an office warehouse space that they've got, and it's on for a week or 2 weeks. And it's that same community, they come. And I think what we're trying to do now is just blow that out a bit more. Things like what we do with GIF Fest, create something that is tangible to the public, that doesn't feel like snobby art. It feels like approachable and something they like. Shit, I know GIFs. I like GIFs. I'm going to go and check that out. The same with Akira. The same with Blade Runner. They carry the audience can come with some already a stepping stone into that show. You know. Yeah. And if you go to some.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I'm an art lover. I go to biennales whenever I can. I travel to see art shows. And I can see how, without insider knowledge, that if you were to come to this, like real down-to-earth people, they would be like, this is bullshit, or like, it's really alienating. And I think that's what I found. I mean, I come from Newcastle. My mates are like, they like some parts of art. They like graffiti. They like street art. They like T-shirts. They like GIFs, they like memes. And so that's where it's come from. It's come from this sort of bloodline of like keeping your sort of feet on the ground and not doing ideas that are so lofty that people feel a bit like dismissive of it.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think you can see that in any project that I touch, even my own work. It's like, it's fairly approachable, it's lowbrow. But then there's already an existing art establishment, and I think you can kind of enrich your life by going through that and exploring biennales and art shows that are not so lowbrow. But I think it's a gateway drug, for want of a better word, like these kind of shows, to get people interested, and then the wider public for sure. I mean, if you look at something like in London, they have the summer show, you know, the Royal Academy, right? So they do a call for entries across the whole of UK, and they mix it up with professional artists and outsiders. And it's a national event, you know, it's on TV, everyone gets behind it, and everyone has a level of interest in it. And I think partly because in every household, there's someone who has a crack at it, you know. It might be Uncle Dennis who's done a painting, or it might be, you know, our Kevin who's done a tapestry or whatever. But
sure, okay, yeah.
That groundswell has really helped a wider appreciation of art, because, okay, if they don't get in, everyone's bitter, like, yeah, it's shite anyway. But I think deep down, there's an interest there because it's gone really out into the hearts of everybody. And a lot of those people who've been sort of attracted to the summer show have then gone on to go to other exhibitions and find their way through the art world. And it's a brilliant sort of gateway drug. So a national contest is something different. I mean, they do them here in Singapore, but I think they don't curate it well, or they do it in a bit of a twee way, and they do it in an abstract way, so people still don't get it.
Well, and look, you know, Singapore's, and I do want to go back to you saying that you're a humble Newcastle boy, because I think that's a bit of a, I don't know, that's a misstatement of the cosmopolitan origins that you in fact have, sir. But no, it's interesting that you're working on these initiatives here in Singapore, where there was that famous statement from the founding father of the country, Lee Kuan Yew, that when you're building, I paraphrase, but when you're building a nation, there's no time for poetry. I think he said, it's all about getting down to business and doing what needs to be done. And it was about transforming this place from the 1960s to the 1990s, from a third world to a first world country. And the Singaporean authorities have done that incredibly successfully. But Singapore could be compared to Venice, couldn't it? Which was, it's an a city state, a small city state, but that has sort of outsized influence on its region. And Venice was hugely influential artistically.
Yeah, but I think Venice is a different example, because actually,
I'm talking a few hundred. Well, several.
No, I know. But Venice has natural resources. Venice has, it can live off its own land. What's interesting about Singapore is it's more aligned with California in terms of 1940s California. Nothing there, right? It was a new built city. It was built on creativity and culture. There was no arable land, really. I mean, it's a really interesting parallel. And I think, why can't Singapore have a film industry like Hollywood? Okay, maybe because of drugs and rules, but that was what pioneered California. And I think there's a really good, I can't remember what it was, maybe if I find the YouTube, there's an interesting documentary about the history of California and creativity. And whilst I was watching it, of course, I've got Singapore in my mind. Now, yeah, there's this idea that it's not needed when the shit hits the fans. For example, the COVID non-essential jobs type thing. Yeah. I mean, fair enough. You know what I mean? Like, it's like a doctor of philosophy is not going to stop your heart on the plane, when you're bleeding to death or whatever. It's like, I get that. I wasn't upset by that sort of whatever it was, that article, but it also helped me place in my mind, like, what was the purpose of art and that sort of cultural idea. And there was many points of view on it, but the most important one I felt was about creativity. And I think art is, again, going back to that idea of art is not creativity, okay? Creativity is actually a really essential skill,
Certainly, yeah.
Scientists trying to invent a vaccine, I think if they phrased that differently, they would have a very different outcome on those polls. You could have done that same survey in any country. It's not because of Singapore. I think any Joe Public would have said art is a non-essential thing. So I don't have a gripe with that. But it helped us still formulate this idea of like, well, what is? And it's this idea of creativity and problem solving. And so that's been a real driver for this educational kind of shtick that we're doing. And then, of course, by doing young education stuff, it's almost like we're alienating, like, my existing community who are like, they like all this sort of B-trash movie weird stuff, and that's where like Quaranzine came in. I mean, you mentioned it earlier. So kind of like we did this during lockdown. It's a really rough and dirty zine, but it's kind of quite, I like to think it's quite poetic because I wrote a poem at the beginning. Do you want to hear it?
Don't be too literal on it, Steve. But
politicians scampered as the roads cleared. Airports closed gates as infection neared. Factories switched off as the animals cheered. Nature flourished and Mother Earth breathed. What can we do to alleviate fear? Some people got critical, some people got kind, some got inventive during this time. Some kept their heads while others lost their minds. News became tiresome, schools forced to close, society went digital, including the crime. So it was like a zine which kind of captured a lot of the different views and things that I was seeing in my feed. and a lot of invited artists, some memes in there. You know, that's an old repurposed meme. The kid watching it.
Well, and it was you know, I remember when you were sending out the solicitation for contributions. And it just strikes me, and I wanted to ask you, you know, so many of the things that the projects that you work on or in and or around are very collaborative, and one could, you know, could even say that the artwork that you do on your own, because it is kind of bowerbird plucking and picking bits and pieces and using a collage approach, is also collaborative, just in a I guess the people you're collaborating with don't know. What do you think it is that you know drove you to constantly be this collaborative approach? You know, is it like a hip hop music? Is it, I don't know.
I think music's a good analogy. I think it's purely about being inspired by the people's artwork that I see online. You know, I see my buddies making cool shit, and I'm like, oh man, wouldn't it be good to get this all together? So that you put that curator's hat on. It's like, that's why we've thrown shows for over 10 years now in Singapore in like the dirtiest, grottiest galleries, you know. And I think we've built a network of like really doers and givers and artists that like, yeah, shit, I'm down, you know. And like they don't, it's not a commercial thing. It's like, yeah, I want to do it because I want to make something, and this feels like it's gonna be like a cool project, so I'll do it. As an artist, I can also understand what questions are going to go through their head when they receive an invitation from a certain person to do a certain project. Primarily, it's like, am I interested in this project? If I'm not, then it's like, how much money is there? And I think a lot of creatives are deep down, they do the work for free, like they just like making stuff, you know. And it's about like making work that creatively they can do what they want, right? They can make something strong, they can make something cool that a client would never buy, okay? But I can kind of help more people see it, right? And you act as a conduit for more people to see it. And also collectively, when you have a group show, and I think anyone young starting out doing this should really like do this, because if you're a photographer, all right, and you want to do an exhibition, but it's like, oh, I can't do a show because I don't have enough money to do the framing, and the galleries are going to rip me off, and or no gallery will take me, I can't afford a venue. What you need to do is find a space. There's always someone with a space. It might not be the perfect space you want, but then you get 10 friends who've taken 10 good photographs or one good photograph, and you've got a group show, bang, all ready to go. And you don't even have to do marketing, because each of those 10 artists has an audience already that will bring, and they will come to the opening. So you've got this sort of collective force of, I mean, okay, there's crossover, there's people who are my fans, who are your fans, or whatever, but like, the point being, when you do a physical show opening, all of them are going to come, and it's a really fun thing, because it's like party time. It's like a club night where it's your community or your DJ playing. And the gallery was almost like the warm-up party for everyone else to go clubbing with that sort of scene. And I think Cult was really key in that part of the process. Cult Gallery's still there, still going, you know. Personally, I just got a bit fed up. It was 10 years, you know. I just wanted a different brand to do it under. I wanted to do some different things. But I think there's still a need for it. And I think there's need for other people to be doing it as well. And I've watched like collectives spring up over the years, and I get really excited by that. You know, I mean, Knuckles and Notch, the guys doing the risograph printing, and they make a lot of zines. And then you've got like a bunch of little collectives popping up doing little underground shows, and that's like shit that was never happening 10 years ago. So the more people that are becoming disenchanted with the workscape, the jobscape, they're creating their own fun, you know, and they're not driven particularly by money, but they're driven by the sharing of ideas. It's like, you know, you don't get paid to put shit on Instagram, but you put shit on there anyway, right? And why do you do that? Because like, you like sharing, you like people absorbing your work, you like getting feedback. The same goes for a physical show. There's just a lot of hurdles in doing physical shows in Singapore, in any country for that matter. Gallery spaces are expensive. warehouses are like a nightmare because you need to get them air conned, especially in Singapore, or like, you know, they
Yeah,
need electricity. So
yeah,
you're
yeah.
always playing with money as a factor. So if you start small, there was a really fun show in Sim Lim Tower, Sim Lim Square, in an old computer shop, and I was like, "Fuck, that's
Okay.
genius! Whoever scored that was great," you know. And they did a little art show in there, and more of that, please. I think that's how the scene starts. And Singapore's like young, and you know, like it's like 1950s almost in terms of the conservative public, but you got a few kind of wayward uh, characters who are starting to drive little independent music scenes, independent bookstores, and that's how it goes. Next, it should be film, and people being confident to make their own indie films without an audience, and they'll
Yeah.
find that audience.
Well, it's the great thing with the digital revolution, internet, what have you, you know, since the 90s, that you could be doing something that is ridiculously niche and living in the smallest town in the backwoods of Timbuktu, but you go online or you do it online and you will find your tribe. You will find the handful of people who are into the same weird
A good
shit that
example is
you're
that
into
the
elsewhere.
synth. Have you seen Synth Britannia, the documentary about the
No,
rise of synthesizer music and the 80s
no.
kind of like synth? It was popping up in like Sheffield, in London, in Manchester, and there was no internet. There was no like these guys were working in silos, but it all kind of happened at the same time. Um, so I think now Singapore's music has diversified enormously since internet's come in, and people are like going to really obscure gigs, and that's great. When I was first here, it was pretty R&B central, you know, nothing else. Um, and I think it's still not yet mainstream, but if you could go to some indie gigs at Fort Canning and they're packed out, and it's like, wow,
Mm.
you know, there is an audience. Um, so again, if the music scene or the film scene really takes off in Singapore, then the graphics and the art scene will follow because they're going to need posters, they're going to need gig album covers or whatever,
Mm.
like animations, music videos. If you look at anywhere like UK or US or France, that's how it happened. It was the visual packaging of music that drove whoever's a famous designer or famous illustrators, is because they were sort of bundled in with musicians. I see a bit of cross collaboration of musicians and graphic artists and things like that. But again, it's like there isn't that demand that can afford sales, which can then unlock people to get more adventurous in what they do, both graphically and musically.
Definitely, definitely. Well, it's. How do you see that translating in a world where creative products, whether it's whether it's books, whether it's music, aren't so much about, yeah, someone like Peter Saville, for instance, who did all of that incredible stuff for Factory Records and packaging, where famously the sleeve for Blue Monday by New Order, they lost 30 pence. The record company, the label lost 30 pence for every copy that they sold, and sadly it was a big hit, so they lost a bloody fortune because the packaging was so ridiculously ornate and complicated to print. But now it's not about that physical product anymore. It's about streaming that
Yeah,
piece of music and maybe looking at the music video, maybe looking at that artist's
I think that
Instagram.
I think what you're saying is exactly right. The formats are changing, like
Mm,
and if you're a versatile designer, you need to know a little bit of like coding, you need to know a little bit of like animation. And if you're a musician, you should also be exploring formats like, is a sort of 4 minute song the way to go? Or is it creating a soundscape for a film or a digital thing or a website? And then can you sell that? Is it like behind a paywall? And and I think people are really doing that now. Um, uh, and yeah, you have to give some things away for free, but also you also should value what you do as well. That um, get people interested enough so that they pay for something. It's an interesting conundrum because it's so saturated. Lots of artists, lots of musicians, lots of people doing things for free and whatnot. And I think the glamorization of design, which is what happened with Savile and being like sort of swept away with the music, gave it a cachet and gave it a value that Peter Savile wouldn't have had if those musicians were shit and unknown.
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah.
He's a good designer, but his name got big because of he kind of hacked this idea of like, yeah, well, I made a cover for Blur or New Order or whatever, and then it happened. You know, his artwork was on bloody posters all over UK, all over the world. And he also realized that these brands like EMI or whatever, they had budget back then, so he could do an artwork and it would be fly posted all over Brighton, all over London, and it was a way, an egotistic way of seeing your art everywhere. And I think, you know, we've tried that with brands. Like we used to do something for Tiger Beer, Tiger Translate, and that was us trying to piggyback their clout in terms of their access to billboards, their access to media, and using it to showcase fucking cool art, you know, like, and it worked. We did it for years. We had billboards in bloody Phnom Penh and stuff that were not even selling, well, they were selling beer through incidentally, but they were essentially just an artwork. And I think Toscani was the one that got me onto that idea. Oliviero Toscani, the Benetton photographer, you know, he basically used Benetton as a mouthpiece to show his photography and get his viewpoints across. Of course, everyone was like, "What the hell is this going to do with Benetton?" But I think the idea was kind of genius because he was like, "Right, I can't get enough people to see my artwork, right?" And then you see like MRT or you see billboards in the airport and you find out like who is advertising here. Then it's like, okay, well maybe I speak to them about showing my art, right? And I think that's where the negotiation needs to take place. Because once you've created that name, then you can create a value on what you do, right? Or you can work for clients, or you can sell your own work at a decent cost, or you can get commissions. So, so it's really about getting people to value what not you individually do as an artist or a designer, but collectively what we do and as artists and designers, and for people to appreciate that and put it and be willing to put down more than what they thought you were worth previously.
Yeah.
You
know? I've asked this is a slightly different thing, but I've asked this same question of a few people in music recently, but no one in visual expression. So how, in your opinion, do you think that the experience that many of us have gone through in the world over the last few months of being very confined, I mean, you know, we're luckier, and you and I believe are, you know, living in the same neighborhood, which is quite nice and green, and we can get out there and get out to the, we're living in the Coronaville neighborhood. But we're fortunate enough to be able to, you know, go out for a walk down the very, you know, rainforesty green corridor. But there's been a lot of people who, you know, especially countries like, you know, or if you're in Paris, or if you're in Madrid, or if you're in Rome, you might be in a 2-bedroom apartment where you're literally haven't been allowed out for a couple of months. And yes, if you're a creative person, whether that's a visual artist, whether that's a writer, whether that's a musician, that's going to affect the type of stuff that you're creating. How do you reckon it's gonna reflect on that? Or you know,
I think there's two bits to that question that I want to answer. One is like, I think sort of like visual artists who they don't mind not being able to go out because they can work at home. I think people who suffered like creatively are probably photographers and filmmakers because they need to be out and about to make their stuff, right? But I think outside of creatives, like just general, well, even creatives, we've consumed so much more probably TV, books, music, websites, memes, online magazines, apps than we've had time to ever do previously. So I feel like people's tastes have changed and people have refined what they're looking for a bit more. And I think people are getting more, what's the word? Like, not determined, but like discerning, right?
Okay.
In their what shit they're going to watch on TV. It's like, I'm not watching this anymore. You know, I realize it's crap because they're trying to watch it for stimulation as opposed to just putting something on in the background while they're doing whatever daily stuff. They've been really engaging with content, and I think like that will be something interesting to see how it affects the next couple of years in terms of output from artists. I think a lot of artists have got something new to talk about in terms of the virus. I think there's other things at play. You know, there's sort of politics. There's diversity. It's not just the virus that's been going on. There's a lot of like poignant issues that artists are grappling with. Maybe feel like they don't have the right to say anything, or they're nervous because everyone's sort of hypersensitive at the minute. So I think once the dust settles a little bit on what's been going on, yeah, the work will be taking into account everything that's happened, and that is about diversity. I mean, you already see it in advertising and mainstream culture. They're embracing the sort of Black Lives Matter idea. I think generally the wider public has got a bit more awakened to the idea, and on the news or on soap operas, whatever. I think like it's good. What's been going on is good, except maybe not the politics side, but like.
Well, not the pandemic side either. That's not been.
No, but I think there's certain parts of the pandemic which has been necessary, absolutely necessary, for people to just take a breather for a minute and sort of reassess their priorities and yeah,
Sure.
it's gonna like hit the economy hard, but I think everyone needed that pause. You know, all of nature needed that pause. It could go on for longer, and okay, it doesn't need that much, but just even like a little bit of a reprieve gave everyone a bit of perspective, I think. So yeah, whether everyone just rushes back into old habits, probably will. But I think there'll be some interesting things to come out of it in terms of film. When we're allowed to go out and make film again, people will be making films about this period, and I think that will be interesting. And sort of reportage of what's been going on by photographers who are now allowed out. When that starts sort of coming back at us in forms of longer culture, then yeah, I see it having more substance, having more meaning, having more relatable it's not atas art that's alienating. I think it's real issues, and it could be heavy, but there might be people who take it in a new direction and might make us look at it in a fun way or in a light-hearted way or an appreciative way. So what was funny about doing the zine was actually some of the humor involved in it.
Sure.
You know, I mean, it's dry humor, but the fat man on the seesaw by himself, you know, or the cat with the mask. I think it wasn't all doom and gloom, is what I'm saying. There was some funny thing, like the stretchy hand, you know, the toy hand thing.
Yeah.
And I think that taking light of the situation, the Denny's there, always open, but then it's closed, you know. Satire. I think we'll see. I haven't really been watching the Have I Got News for You and those types of game shows, which are obviously current affairs. And it might be too sort of close to the bone to be making fun of what's been going on recently in terms of the pandemic. But I do see it being something that people might have a different perspective on in 6 months or whatever. Okay?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, you remember 2020? What a fucking nightmare. Sorry, you know, shit show, as it's called. There'll be shit show T-shirts everywhere.
We're all adults here, I think. Well, some of us,
Yeah.
so long as neither of my
Speak for
daughters watch.
yourself.
So we're not really all adults here. But no, it's, you know, my sort of default reaction to any serious or tragic occurrence is to try to make light of it and make some humor of it. But it's
a human condition. You need to deal with stuff, you know, like death, you know, sadness. Like it's laugh or cry type situation, and I think people take different speeds to get there. You know, too soon comes to mind, like with some of the jokes, but
and we all have to be so earnest and sensitive these days, you know. It's and
there's ways around that, and I think if you're truly like a creative or a storyteller, you don't have to upset people by telling funny anecdotes and stories like universally funny jokes. The bear and the rabbit, you know, that's not upsetting anybody. It's just quality stuff, you know, which is kind of like a bit cheeky, but very much like okay for my 8-year-old, like, you know what I mean? And I think those are the smarter comics, and it's not watered down. It's just creative storytelling, and they will be the people who. There's always going to be the controversial comics who rock the boat and they want to talk about issues and provocative things, and they're going to have to be ready to take the sort of the back, what's the word, like the sort of back chat from there. But that's nothing new. I think it just means they'll get heckled more because more people are sort of a bit more conscientious, and if anything, people are going to become maybe more conservative again. You know, maybe the heady days of like 70s, 80s, 90s is gone. You know, this next generation who are like 7 or 8 or 9 are going to be so conscientious that conservatism is going to come back into the mainstream, you know, and not liberalism. And I think that could totally happen. Like the pillars are in place for something like that to happen. We as adults don't care because we've already had our fun, right? But like it is an interesting thing to consider, like those shifts in mindsets. Like how is 2020 going to affect 8 and 9-year-olds who've been stuck at home for so long, and what's that going to mean when they're older? And I think the implications of that won't pan out for years, but it's a global thing, and everyone's hyper connected, especially those kids. They're the first proper digital kids, you know. They're the first people who've had friends all over the world from the first minute they've opened an app or whatever. So that diversity in thinking and collectivity is going to really be ingrained in their systems from an early age, and I think that's quite exciting. But it also poses a thought: what are going to be the side effects of that, and what are the negative things to do with that? And we'll only be able to see with time. So that's what I'm trying to do. I have a bit of influence in that space.
Yeah. No, you're doing great work. If anyone who's online now has got any questions for Steve, because we're running, we've got like 5 minutes left. Instagram just cuts you off after 60 minutes. Cut so, but never mind. No, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Obviously, you know, we need to get a plug in for the actual opening of the exhibition at Siri House at Dempsey Road, where you can also get an outstanding cocktail from my friend Marte. See, it comes up backwards.
Is it in reverse?
It just does for some reason on these Instagram Lives. But for those of us with the right type of mind, the lady vanishes. But
I'm having an exhibition next week. Here's the Exorcista. It's Mary Poppins.
Yes.
And all its glory. So what I'm doing now is I've got all these sort of like antique frames that I'm kind of repurposing for these things, and it's all coming together. So basically next Tuesday the show's on. I mean, it's opening. We're not having an opening party, obviously. So it's more like come and go as you like, and the show's going to be on for sort of 2 or 3 months. and it's very like kind of low density place. It's a Dempsey, it's Surrey House, like you said. It's got a cool garden. You can like not be in with lots of crowd. It's for the kind of
Yeah.
more discerning person who wants to go out but doesn't want to go to like a real busy place. So
The
this
elite, the
is
select
like,
few.
yeah, but I think like it's got a different appeal now than it probably
Yeah.
did before a virus, because it's like, oh, that place is so quiet, I don't want to go there. It's like
Mm.
damn Ulu. But like I think now they are desirable to more
Yeah.
people.
No, it's a great little spot, and the exhibition space is very cool. I'm looking forward to coming over and checking
Yeah,
it
have a
out.
look.
But
Maybe I was thinking I should have done the call from there, man, and wandered around with my phone. But that would
no,
spoil
no,
it. That
not
would
at all.
spoil it.
But I think it's really interesting that you're now, and a lot of the content of this conversation that we've just had has been about the being empowered by the internet and by social media and whatever else, to reach a global audience, which is much broader. And as you were saying, for like the Akira show, that it was able to reach a lot more people than it would have in a physical sense, by the virtue of the fact that it had to become a digital virtual thing, which is great. But at the
And
same time,
it will continue to be important. But I think people also, if you have a physical space, or a physical exhibition, you need to like. I think the fact that only a few people can go in at a time is a blessing for anyone trying to craft
yeah,
an experience that interactive artworks, because it means you can really control the way in which people see stuff. And let's say you have a tracker, a screen, a motion tracker, and
mm,
there's only one person in front of it, it really works well. If you've got 20 people behind it, it kind of glitches out and screws up.
yeah,
So, so those sorts of those situations inadvertently are going to make shows a lot more interesting. You might have to pay more to get into art science or whatever, but those experiences will be richer. I mean, there's nothing better than going in a gallery and you've got the whole place to yourself, right? Or
yeah.
a museum. I hate it when it's busy and you're queuing up to see the next artwork or whatever. It's like, oh man, so let's see where that goes, and that's interesting for me. That's like bringing back a bit of optimism into the gallery space in that sense for me. Not
Well,
gallery, sorry,
I think
museum.
it's the same as these human interactions. It's nice chatting with you on my mobile phone here, and for us to communicate and do something that other people can see. But there's nothing that beats seeing across from someone with a frosty lager, and
Well, I'm
talking
drinking
face to
water.
face.
I haven't been drinking on lockdown.
But it's the same thing for art. Is that looking at something in a physical space in its physical sense, and particularly if it's something that's got a great deal of scale to it, and where scale plays a part, or its dimensions play a part in it.
Yeah.
You can't just do that on a little digital
No,
screen.
you could probably do it with a headset or PlayStation. You've got a bit more like of that sort of immersive sort of idea. But yeah, there's nothing beats going through a peep show curtains and like being stimulated on all sides. Like you can only do that in a physical exhibition, right? And I
I haven't
think,
been to any peep shows and been stimulated here in Singapore. I think that's illegal, my friends.
but I tell you what, I bet you have. I bet it's been in retail, and I bet it's like those kind of stores that are high-end stores are becoming they're morphing now into sort of experiences. Like if you look at Gentle Monster, that's like an art show. They sell sunglasses, but the real thing is going through and seeing all these interesting sculptures and art. And I think, well, I hope other retailers, well, they're going to have to. They're going to have to adopt that that thinking, because people will buy online. They're only going to town because they want to go to the cinema, or they want to go bowling, or they want to eat, and those experiences are taking over the high street. So there's a chance now for artists and designers to have retail people as genuine clients, rather than decorating their store, but to become the substance of those stores. And that's interesting, and that's potential creative outlet for a lot of people soon, and music as well.
Well, that's amazing. We've got exactly 30 seconds left before this terminates. But let's continue this conversation over over a cold beer at the Lazy Lizard or at our local
thanks.
Orchid
Who's
or something.
here? Whoever's like joined, thank you.
Yeah, thanks to everyone who watched, and thank you, Steve. Yeah,
There
great
was a
pleasure
big
chatting
drop
with you.
off rate. Was it you? Was it when you were talking or when I was talking? When people fucked off. I saw so many people come through this chain, and then it was like, oh, okay.